to the meeting and welcome to those watching online at home. Now, I must remind you that and members and the public that this meeting is being webcast live and everyone seated must use microphones to be heard on the webcast. There are no scheduled fire alarms, so if it goes off, it's for real. There are two exits in this room, one through the double doors and another behind me to the right. I'll introduce everyone. I'm Councillor Stephen Watson, the Chair. Next to me is Councillor Simon Marlowe, Vice Chair. We have Neil Button, the Interim Development Management Team Leader. Steve Fraser-Lim, Principal Planning Officer. Peter Mannings, Committee Support Officer. Ellen Newman, Senior Planning Officer. Martin Plummer, Service Manager for Development Management and Enforcement. Claire Spendley, Environment Team Manager, Environmental Health. Victoria Wilders, Legal Services Manager. And at the back, we have Elizabeth Oswick and Jenna Hom, who are planning officers. And I would also like to introduce the Council's Executive Member for Planning and Growth, Councillor Vicky Glover-Ward, who won't be taking an active part in this meeting, but is here in an observing capacity. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. Apology from Councillor Ian Devonshire and Councillor Defley is his substitute. Apology from Councillor Aubrey Holt and Councillor Stanbull is his substitute. And finally from Councillor Vicky Burt and Councillor Vicky Smith is her substitute. Thank you.
Right. May I ask all participants to please use your microphones when speaking, as this meeting is being webcasted. And another announcement, Victoria Wilders, our legal services manager, has been providing advice to DMC for 8 years. In fact, it was 8 years ago in December. Oh, September. So, and this is going to be her last DMC. So, thank you, Victoria, and we wish you well for the future.
Chairman, I know it's slightly irregular, but can I just speak to Victoria, if it's possible, just for 2 minutes? I was chairman of this committee for a number of years.
Is your microphone on?
It's on, yes. I was the chairman of this committee for a number of years before the election, and I'd just like to offer my huge thanks to Victoria for all the assistance and support she gave us. She's been a fantastic officer. She's obviously been equally great for you and your committee now, but in my time, she was wonderful. I just want to say thank you very much and put that on record. Thank you.
Now, do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you, Chair. I have to declare I'm a member of Strawberry Town Council, but I have come here with an open mind.
Thank you. And now on to the minutes. We have before us the minutes from the meeting held on 13th of November 2024. Are there any amendments? If there are no amendments needed, then can we have a proposer for the minutes as being an accurate record of the meeting? Councillor Stowe. Second, Councillor Buckmaster. Right, can we have a vote? Oh, sorry.
I think there is a typo on the minutes. I just have to, sorry, I haven't quite got it in front of me, but there is a typo, and I think it's about the very last sentence. Just find it. Sorry. It's a missing.
What page is that?
It's a missing. It's important because it's in the decision, so that's why I kind of noticed it. Just one missing word.
Is it in the reasons at the?
Oh, yes, it's in the resolve on the last page. The application, sorry, the application did not something with policies DS1, BUNT 1, GBR2. There's a missing verb.
Oh yeah.
Accord with.
Yeah, I think the word should be accord. Shall we? Do you want to? How are we going to do this? Shall we?
Is that's what she wants.
Yeah, but it's been.
Comply with.
Tony, do you want to? Yeah,
Comply with.
comply
Comply with.
to comply with. Is that?
One word.
Yeah.
Comply.
With the
comply.
word? Yeah. And Councillor Buckmaster seconds that. So can we have a vote to approve? And
Hands up. Keep the hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. Thank you.
and against? And abstentions? 3.
Thank you.
Those minutes have been agreed. So before we move on to 5A, because we've had some late representations, and to give members a chance to read those late representations, I propose we adjourn for 5 minutes. Will someone second me? Councillor Hill, and we'll vote for that. And against? And abstentions? Thank you. So we're going to adjourn for, Councillor Stowe.
Did raise it earlier, but I think we should announce it in this meeting that Eric Buckmaster didn't call 5A in, and it was called in by Angus.
I know.
Can we
It's
please put that on the record?
I was going to say that, but yes, we can say that now. Yes, it was the upcoming application. It should say Angus Parsard Wyatt called it in, not Councillor Eric Buckmaster. Right. We'll adjourn now and start again at 15:15.
No discussion.
No discussion, please. Have we had a chance to read those? Okay. Right, so next, members, we have before us an application ref 323-2062 FUL for partial changes of use from Class E use into sui generis to allow for live entertainment with the sale of alcohol and hot food, installation of air source heat pump, erection of rear canopy, screen fence, external flue, and external seating area at 28 Knight Street, Sawbridgeworth, Hertfordshire. And I would like to invite Ellen Newman to present the application. Should I mention the speaker? And following Ellen's presentation, there'll be speakers. But
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to note that this presentation covers both agenda item 5A, relating to the full planning application, and the following committee agenda item 5B, which concerns the related listed building consent. Please note that the internal alterations require listed building consent only, and therefore do not form part of the considerations for the full application. Could we go on to the next slide, please? Here we can see the location of 28 Knight Street in the locality of Sawbridgeworth. The application site is situated approximately 10 metres to the north of the Sawbridgeworth town centre boundary. The proximity of the site to the town centre is highlighted on the image in the right-hand side of the slide. Next slide, please. Here we have the site location plan, allowing you to put the building in context with its surroundings. The host building is Grade 2 listed and lies on the western side of Knight Street. Knight Street features a mix of residential and commercial properties. Directly to the north of the site is the Queen's Head pub, while Forbert and Barnard's Infant School is located across the street. Other nearby businesses include Peking Palace, a Chinese restaurant, and Beau Bell's, a hairdresser, both situated to the southwest along Knight Street. The proximity of this site to these uses is highlighted on the image on the right-hand side of the slide. The site is within the Sawbridgeworth Conservation Area and is surrounded by other listed buildings situated on the western side of Knight Street. This site is part of the designated Sawbridgeworth Neighbourhood Plan and lies within an area of archaeological significance. The building, previously occupied by Barclays Bank, is currently unoccupied. Next slide, please. So here we have a slide that presents the existing elevations of the site, alongside photographs of the building's front elevation and north-facing flank elevation. Next slide, please. This slide displays the existing ground floor site plan and existing first floor plan. It should be noted that the site benefits from an existing car park with 6 spaces located at the rear of the building. Images of the car park and its access via Rowan Walk, which runs alongside the building, are shown on the right-hand side of the slide. Next slide, please. So this slide presents the proposed elevations and floor plans of the host building. Externally, only minor changes are proposed, and those are primarily located at the rear of the site. These include the installation of external signage, a screen fence, the addition of an external flue and air source heat pump, and the construction of a rear canopy to serve the proposed external seating area. Internally, several alterations are proposed to enable the proposed change of use. These include partition walls, flooring, a kitchen prep area, a stage, bar, and food storage area. Modifications to the first floor toilets, including the removal of a bath, relocating sinks and adding toilets is also proposed. Acoustic measures such as secondary glazing and noise absorption are also proposed. The external alterations, which form part of the proposed development, would have a neutral impact on the Sawbridgeworth Conservation Area and setting of the nearby listed buildings, and would therefore would not cause any harm to these heritage assets. The Council's conservation team have been consulted on the application and have concluded the proposed development would result in less than substantial harm to the listed building at the lower end of the sliding scale as a result of a small loss of original fabric and minor works. However, it is considered that there would be a significant public benefit of bringing back a listed building into use, supporting the long-term preservation of the heritage asset. This public benefit, along with the potential contribution to the local economy as a result of bringing a building back into use, would outweigh the less than substantial harm to the significance of the heritage asset. Next slide, please. Regarding the amenity of neighbouring occupiers, the primary consideration is the potential impact of noise and odour from the proposed development. During the application review process, a noise impact assessment was submitted. Since the local planning authority relies on the expertise of the environmental health team for matters concerning noise and odour, officers sought their comments on the report. Following multiple revisions to address feedback and additional information requests from the environmental health officer, the updated noise impact assessment includes various acoustic measures and a noise and vibration management plan. After reviewing the amended report, the environmental health officer has raised no objections, subject to the imposition of conditions. Members are referred to conditions 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, which have been included by the local planning authority to control noise impacts and protect amenities of neighbouring properties. The proposed external seating area, located at the rear of the site, has the potential to generate additional noise. Whilst this is noted, the size of the seating area is limited, which effectively restricts the number of customers who can occupy the space at any given time. Furthermore, the seating area is situated between a flank wall of the building and the northern boundary wall, creating a degree of separation and providing a suitable distance from neighbouring properties. In addition to these spatial considerations, officers have taken into account the mixed-use nature of the surrounding area, which includes both commercial and residential properties, and is within walking distance of the main commercial uses within the town centre. While officers recognise that the seating area could potentially increase the overall noise levels in the area, it should be noted the application site benefits from Class E use, which permits a range of commercial, town centre and employment-based public uses, and is located just outside of the town centre boundary. These are important factors in the assessment, and is in officers' view that the proposed use is compatible and consistent with the mixed character of the area. In considering the potential disturbance from the operation of the use, particularly due to the live entertainment and associated comings and goings, again, it is important to consider the site is located close to the town centre, on a street that already features a mix of commercial and residential uses. The town centre setting naturally accommodates for higher levels of activity, and the proposed hours align with those typically found in similar locations. Therefore, it is not anticipated that the proposal would cause undue harm to the residential amenity of neighbouring properties. Regarding the potential odour impacts associated with the proposed development, it is noted that a flue will be installed within the kitchen area, extending to the building's exterior. The Council's environmental health team were again consulted on this element of the proposal. Following their review, they have raised no objections to the installation of the flue, provided a condition is imposed to require detailed specifications on the installation, operation, and ongoing maintenance and abatement equipment and extraction system. This approach is viewed as a reasonable and practical measure to safeguard the local amenity. It should be highlighted again to members that as the site benefits from a Class E fallback position, the building could be used for a range of other purposes permitted under Class E without requiring planning permission. In such cases, live music could be played without planning permission. However, this application, which proposes a change of use to sui generis, provides the local planning authority with a crucial opportunity to impose conditions, such as acoustic treatments and restrictions on opening hours, to protect the residential amenity of neighbouring properties. This ability to apply such controls is something the local planning authority would not have if the building remained in Class E use. Therefore, overall, the proposed development is not considered to cause any significant unacceptable impact to the amenity of neighbouring occupiers within nearby properties. Next slide, please. Regarding the highway impacts, as previously mentioned, the site includes a car park with 6 spaces located at the rear of the building, and in the top left-hand corner of the image, it's highlighted in the red outline. While there would be a shortfall of on-site parking, officers acknowledged that public parking facilities are available nearby. The Bell Street car park, approximately 230 metres from the site, is considered sufficiently close to provide a practical option for customers. The proximity is illustrated in the image on the right-hand side of the slide. Additionally, the site's location near Sawbridgeworth Town Centre ensures convenient access to public transport, with many residents able to walk to the premises. It is also worth highlighting again that as the current authorised use of the site falls under Class E, the building could be used as a restaurant or cafe without requiring planning permission. This use would likely result in a similar level of parking demand to that anticipated under the proposed use. Therefore, officers consider the site to have a realistic fallback position, as the parking impact is expected to align with that of the existing permitted use. The Highway Authority at Hertfordshire County Council has raised no objections to the proposed change of use, stating that they do not expect a significant increase in traffic compared to the building's previous use as a bank. In the light of Highways Authority's lack of objections, the site's proximity to Bell Street car park, its accessible location in regard to the town centre, and the site's realistic fallback position, it is considered that the level of parking is acceptable, and any shortfall against the standards would comprise an insufficient ground for refusal in this case. I would like to point members to the late representations received. In summary, comments received were from the landscaping officer, who raised no objections to the removal of a small tree located at the rear of the site. Hertfordshire Highways also informed officers that they are currently unsure if the double yellow lines that the applicant noted during the termination period would be coming forward, and therefore limited weight can be given to that. And obviously further objections from neighbouring properties and councillors have also been received. However, officers consider those comments have already been adequately addressed in the committee reports. So in conclusion, the proposed development would result in less than substantial harm to the listed building. However, it is considered that the significant public benefit of bringing the listed building back into use, supporting the long-term preservation of the heritage asset, and economic benefits to arise out of the commercial use, together with a positive impact on supporting a vibrant and mixed-use area, would outweigh any harm to the significance of the heritage asset. The proposed development would have a neutral impact on the Sawbridgeworth Conservation Area and nearby listed buildings. Furthermore, there are not considered to be any significant amenity concerns with the implementation of the proposal, nor are there any significant concerns regarding the impact of the scheme on the surrounding highway. It is therefore recommended agenda item 5A concerning the full planning application should be granted, subject to appropriate conditions. Similarly, agenda item 5B relating to the listed building consent application should be granted, subject to appropriate conditions. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, we have speaking against an objector, Sarah Glover. You have 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
There we go. I speak for over 100 residents of Sawbridgeworth who strongly oppose this application. Any application that threatens the health and well-being of so many people will be emotive, but our objections are based not on emotions, but on facts. The application places a live entertainment venue into the residential part of a small town. It would be operational 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. The location of the venue is outside of the town centre and is beyond the secondary shopping frontage. Adjacent neighbours include elderly residents in a retirement complex and people with young families. The noise impact assessment contains fundamental omissions. It does not consider the noise impacts of the outdoor seating area, bottle drops, deliveries, and patrons arriving and leaving. On a street where you can hear people's footsteps as you walk by, this noise increase will be considerable. We strongly disagree with the office's opinion that the noise and disturbance will not result in significant unacceptable concerns. They will clearly have a significant detrimental impact on neighbours, contravening policies DES4 and EQ2. With any type of venue like this will come antisocial behaviour. Who will police it? Should we as a community have to put up with social disorder? Should the primary school opposite have to put up with discarded drinks and broken glass in the morning as the children arrive at school? The applicant has not submitted a parking or transport plan and has no viable means of ensuring safe arrival and departure. Access to the car park is via a single-track private lane with blind entry onto Knight Street. The road in front of the venue has a pedestrian crossing and zigzag lines, so where will people park and where will taxis wait? There simply is no plan and no assurance that traffic can be managed safely, which contravenes policy TRA2. There is no waste management or servicing plan. Are delivery and bin lorries supposed to drive up the single track lane and then reverse onto Knight Street? This is what has happened during the construction works the applicant has undertaken over the past 13 months. It contravenes policy TRA3 and is simply dangerous. The applicant has submitted numerous tweaks to the application over the past 13 months, yet the above points have not been addressed. Despite the volume of concerns that have been raised by the community, the applicant has not engaged with us once. So what does this say about his attitude towards residents? And what would it say about this council if you approve this application? Councillors, the above points are set out in detail in our letter to you. We urge you to refer to this in your deliberations and consider each point carefully. We believe this application is entirely inappropriate for its location and would cause significant harm. No planning conditions can be imposed that will change the above facts, and we respectfully implore you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Next we have Darren Sides and or Chris Bensing to speak for the application. But first of all, we've got two names down here to speak for the application. Do we have anyone? Do we have Darren Sides, Daryl Sides, or Chris Bensing here? Nope. In that case, I will call Councillor Nathan Parsad Wyatt to speak. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Allowing me to speak this evening. I'm Councillor Nathan Parsad Wyatt, Chair of the Sawbridgeworth Town Council Planning Committee, and I'm here to represent the cross-party opposition of our council to this application. This is not about opposing development for the sake of it. We would welcome a thoughtful proposal that would bring this building back into use, but this particular application is wholly inappropriate, entirely incompatible with its location, and would cause significant harm to our residents, as Sarah has outlined. The officer recommendation for approval fails to adequately address breaches of 4 key district plan policies designed to safeguard residents and ensure safe development and preserve community character. First, EQ2, relating to noise pollution. The noise assessment ignores key disturbances like outdoor seating, bottle bins, deliveries, and patrons leaving late at night. These impacts will severely disrupt residents, especially those in the nearby retirement complex. This location is simply unsuitable for a venue of this type. Second, TRA2, safe access. The single lane providing rear access is unsafe, with a blind exit onto Knight Street, a street heavily used by pedestrians, including young children from the school opposite, and this poses an unacceptable safety risk. Third, parking provision, TRA3, 6 parking spaces for a venue serving 235 people is entirely inadequate. Overflow parking will overwhelm already congested streets, and the suggested mitigation that patrons use a public car park elsewhere in Sawbridgeworth is impractical, unenforceable, and counter to human behaviour. Taxis may provide an alternative, but create further issues of noise, air quality impact from idling, and safety from the lack of space to wait or turn. And finally, DES4, design of development. Development must respect local character and avoid harm to neighbours. This proposal would turn Knight Street, a quiet residential area, into a late night entertainment hub with inevitable impacts on noise, disruption and antisocial behaviour. These are not minor breaches, they're serious failures that cannot be resolved through conditions. What condition could silence late night noise or create parking where none exists or make a blind exit safe? These impacts are unavoidable, unacceptable and unenforceable, and members should not be deceived that these conditions can mitigate these harmful impacts. In 2019, DMC rightly refused a similar application for a piano bar at 1 The Square on the grounds of noise disturbance and parking issues nearby. The harm here is even greater, and you can draw on that decision outlined in our written submission as a template to confidently refuse this application. Now, officers may tell you that the concerns raised are minor and dissuade you from refusal, lest it lead to an appeal, but your role is to ensure decisions reflect local needs and concerns, not to simply endorse officer recommendations. This applicant fails on noise pollution, inadequate parking, unsafe access, and harm to the character and amenity of Knight Street, and you should feel confident refusing it on those grounds. I hope you make the right decision and refuse the application this evening. Thank you very much.
And next we have Councillor Angus Parsard-Wyatt. You. Yes, District Councillor. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, members. As Councillor Stowe noted, I wanted to clarify at the beginning that I made the request to call this application into committee. I did so due to significant public interest and concerns about the proposal, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide additional context to you this evening and in my written submission. I'd also like to start by thanking the residents of Sawbridgeworth who are here in the public forum this evening for coming along. We thank the officers for their report and their hard work over the last 13 months on this, but we respectfully and firmly disagree with their assessment. Knight Street is described as a mixed-use street in or near the town centre. This does not accurately reflect the reality of this predominantly residential street, with the proposed venues surrounded by family homes on 3 sides and adjacent to a retirement complex and a primary school. An alcohol serving, hot food cooking, live music playing, midnight closing venue would fundamentally change the character of this quiet, family-oriented street. As you've heard from Sarah and Nathan, the key issues of noise, ASB, waste management, parking and traffic not only represent serious harms to residents' quality of life, but collectively breach East Herts District Plan policies EQ2, TRA2, TRA3 and DES4. The conditions proposed by officers are largely unenforceable and not realistic mitigations to these harms. The 2019 application for a piano wine bar at 1 The Square, which Nathan mentioned, was closer to the town centre of Sawbridgeworth. That was refused on grounds of harm from noise, disturbance and lack of parking, all of which apply to an even greater extent in this case. Approving this application would undermine the committee's previous decision and set a dangerous precedent, whereas refusal would ensure consistency and clarity. I know going against officers' recommendations is not a decision that members take lightly, but I also know that none of you here became councillors only to rubber stamp officers' views. This committee exists to scrutinise applications in the community's best interests and ensure that development is appropriate. This development is clearly not appropriate, and you should feel confident refusing it on the policy grounds we have outlined. If you have any doubt about the impact of this venue, or whether the officer's view outweighs the concerns of residents, you should refuse this application. Doing so would allow the applicant to either address these concerns in a revised proposal or test their case at appeal, where it can be scrutinised further. Approving this application, however, leaves no recourse, no appeal, and no control over how the venue may be used in the future. In over a year, despite 81 local objections, the applicant has made no attempt to consult residents or address their concerns, showing disregard for the community and the planning process, and their absence tonight speaks volumes. If you approve this application, what message does that send? That local voices, proper engagement and due process don't matter? That is what residents and those watching will hear. As a listening council, I urge you all to listen to residents tonight. We are counting on you to stand up for our community, protect residents' quality of life, and reject this inappropriate development. I urge you all to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members. Right. Where would we like to start? Remind you, we're looking at application 5, item 5A.
Full permission.
For full permission. Councillor Estop.
Chair, can I start with a question about the fundamental proposal, which is sui generis because this use doesn't fit into the existing use class E. We've heard from the officer that if it was a restaurant or a bar, that would be part of class E. So the focus is on live entertainment. We're thinking about a planning permission for live entertainment. But my question is, I've looked amongst all the papers and I've seen one reference to comedy and occasional live bands being invited, but that's all. And I don't know if I've missed something, but is there, so the first part of the question is there more information about the nature of the live entertainment? And is there any information about its programming? We've heard 7 days a week. So do we know that there's a program of that nature? And how would live entertainment be managed? So that information. And then we've heard the figure 235 people. Is that information, I haven't read that either, but is that information that we've had from the applicants who aren't here? We've noted that. Is that information part of their explanation of the live entertainment?
Just to add that, I think, am I right that it being a bar, that would necessitate sui generis as well?
So, yes, Councillor Estop, you're correct in saying that it's Class E as a sort of restaurant or cafe, but the fact that the applicant is wanting to incorporate a bar and the live entertainment, that triggers the need for sui generis. So that's the need for planning permission in this case.
And what about the other points? Did you want those addressed to the?
Yes, please, Chair.
So in terms of the types of music, we haven't been provided with that information. It is solely just the live entertainment aspect that we've been provided with. Hours of operation are proposed to be controlled via a condition which would allow the premises to be open 7 days a week. And the figure in terms of the amount of people contained within the site, I wasn't aware of a specific figure put forward by the applicant either. So I think that's covered everything that you...
I mean, when you count up the seats, it's about 45, 50 seats by the look of it. And I suppose they could clear all the tables and chairs out and people would stand. But 235 seems a bit more than I would imagine that would fit, but I don't know.
Councillor Copley.
Thank you. I just wanted to focus on, obviously we've talked about it being a mixed use, or the officers have talked about it being a mixed use area. I'd actually like to say I grew up in Sawbridge. I actually spent the first 18 years of my life there. I did my piano lessons to Rome Walk, a lady who lives there, so I do know the site incredibly well, and I've still obviously got many friends there. My parents lived there until recently as well. So in my mind, it isn't a mixed use site. Very much that is a residential area. You've got Bell Street, which is obviously the main town centre, bits at the end. But as you're going out that direction, it just seems to me to be completely out of keeping in terms of having a live music venue there. And my fear would be that if we agree to this, we've basically opened up an entirely different type of town centre by adding that there. I mean, I know there's been reference to the Queen's Head, but that is a sleepy pub that doesn't have live music on 7 days a week. And so really, I'm very worried about the DES 4 in terms of avoiding significant detrimental impacts on the amenity of occupiers and neighbours and properties, particularly people down Rowan Walk, and also the bit about the obviously waste trucks going out. I mean, that's an incredibly narrow road. I'm not even sure if it's private, because at certain points it's not been very well kept up, and trying to safely reverse a lorry in and out. So I suppose my question is, you know, if we weren't saying this was mixed use in this area, which seems to me to be residential, and you've got the school opposite as well, then would we be pushed towards a different decision on that basis? Thanks.
But thank you. So in terms of the mixed use sort of statement, it would be useful to go back to one of the first slides in the presentation. So if you could go back a few slides, please. Keep going. The next one, sorry. Yeah, perfect. That's one. So as sort of highlighted in the presentation, in terms of the mixed use nature of Knight Street, obviously the image on the right-hand side indicates other uses other than residential along Knight Street. And I note that the Peking Palace and the Bow Bells do actually fall within the town centre boundary. But it's not uncommon for uses to sort of spill somewhat out of that defined boundary. So the location of the site being here, officers don't consider to be out of character and wouldn't be out of character along Knight Street. In terms of the waste and the private and the access along Rowan Walk, it's important to note that the site would utilise an existing access. And whilst we note the change of use could potentially increase the number of trips along that road, no objections have been raised by the Highway Authority in terms of the ongoing use of the access. So officers would consider it's a form sort of an insufficient reason for refusal to say that that access isn't suitable when it's existing, and the Highway Authority have raised no objections to the continued use of it.
Yeah, I suppose I'm more thinking about particularly, you know, Des 4C in terms of, I think this is, you know, significant detriment to those people who live there. If we change it, it will massively impact their lives. And that very narrow going in and out, that is an impact on them. I mean, that isn't happening. Obviously, it's a bank at the moment, not actually even a functioning bank. So that I'm just trying to get my head around that, because I just feel like it isn't in accordance with what's currently there. It is a sleepy residential street, honestly. This is totally out of keeping with what's there. Thank you.
Councillor Deafley.
Thanks very much. So I visited the site myself and I had a look, and I can see that there are residential properties very close. I mean, within 3 metres of the boundary. So I'm very concerned about policy EQ2. And I've gone to the local plan and had a look, and I think 2434 in the local plan is pretty clear on this actually, which was quite refreshing. It says where new noise generating developments such as industrial, commercial and outdoor recreation uses are proposed, it is expected that they will be located at an appropriate distance away from noise sensitive development, i.e. residential areas, schools and hospitals. So I'm struggling. I'm looking for officers to clarify this and give me the comfort I need, because I can't get past the fact that there's a conflict there in my mind at the moment. So how would you address that?
So in terms of the location of the use, as I sort of have already stated, it's not uncommon for commercial uses to sort of overspill a town centre defined boundary. Could you just sort of repeat the first part of your question again? Sorry.
Yeah, so it's really that there seems to be a conflict between what the local plan is not even suggesting, but very clear about, and the actual proposed change of use in terms of where a proposed development such as this should be located. And in my mind, the real reason that I'm concerned about it is the live music, and there isn't really enough information here tonight for us to really understand that, which is a bit of a shame actually. So I'm concerned about noise pollution, and I'm wondering why 2434 hasn't, or how can I put it, why it hasn't taken precedent in this particular application.
Sorry, can I take the to address the councillor? Firstly, regarding the character of the area, it's been touched upon that the area is mixed, and the plan on the screen identifies the mix of uses, and so the officer assessment is to reflect what you see on the screen, and so the site itself, we can't get away from the fact that it benefits from a Class E use, and that Class E use, if I can just refer members to the use classes order, use Class E includes commercial, business and service, and so without the need for planning permission, this commercial building could be used as a shop for the sale of hot food. It can be used as a food and drink establishment, restaurant, for food consumed on the premises. It could be consumed as financial services, professional services, indoor sport and recreation, medical services, non-residential creche, day nursery, or a day centre, or an office, research and development of products, and light industries. So the use of that building is a commercial use already, and so in all of those ancillary and associated uses that go with those, like servicing, refuse collection, hours of business, that is at the moment not subject to any form of planning control, and as my colleague has already established in her presentation, by granting planning permission subject to conditions, that affords the local planning authority the ability to control the uses, and particularly the conditions that have been referenced regarding noise as being the major concern. And so I think that's just all bits of information that I think is certainly material to the consideration of the proposals. In terms of the live music and sale of alcohol, that passes into other legislative areas such as licensing, and my colleague here from the environmental health team, I'm sure will be happy to answer questions about the noise assessment, and particularly your question about EQ2, I think it was the policy, and about the compliance with that. I think it'd be useful for you to hear from the environmental health officer and the steps that we've taken as a local planning authority in taking a steer from that. And so if I can sort of refer to my colleague, that would.
Thanks, Neil. Hi. I think it's important to note that the existing public house next door, whilst I appreciate may not currently play live music, under the DREG, they have the ability at any time to play live music, and we don't have the powers to put such controls on it that we currently have in this planning committee to control the current application in question. So that's just a side point. As also mentioned by Neil, things such as bin drops, emptying of bottle bins, etc. All that would be covered under the licensing regime. We are also consulted in environmental health from our licensing colleagues. We have noise management plans and working plans in place for all kinds of premises. We've got lots of mixed use areas in East Herts where residents and businesses are side by side without any of these issues because we closely control them. So I think that covers that off. With regards to the noise report in question, as I say, we have the ability in this application, which is very rare, to put really stringent controls on this because it's not an existing public house. So we have used the most stringent guidance available, which is NANR 92, noise from pubs and clubs, which requires inaudibility of noise within any residential premises. And so inaudibility, not low, not below stat nuisance level, inaudibility. And the applicants have proven that with the correct noise mitigation in place, which we have conditioned, that they will meet this inaudibility condition. If the Queen's Pub next door, however, decides to have live music tomorrow, we cannot require them to have all of this mitigation to allow for inaudibility. We would have to go to reasonableness, statutory nuisance, so it'd be much more liberal.
I'd like to come back to the point about licensing as well, if I may, because we're hearing the perfectly reasonable and legitimate concern about noise from loud music. I can understand that, and and we don't have a great deal of information in the application to go on. However, because there is another layer of control that sits with licensing that can establish the hours of operation, can establish the the hours they can perform live music. That is a level of control that sits outside of the planning process. This is governing the use, but the actual operational side of the premises would be under another regime.
Can I just come in on that as well? Obviously, just to endorse what the officers said. Obviously, there's two distinct regimes. So obviously, the planning, which we're here to determine tonight, but also some of the factors that some of the speakers have mentioned that will be dealt with under the licensing regime, like the licensing objectives, so the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. They are all the licensing objectives, which will be dealt with under the licensing regime as opposed to the planning regime.
So can I just ask for clarity then? Does the applicant have a licence at the moment, or is that going to be a separate process?
That will be a separate process. I don't think, unless anyone tells me otherwise, that they've applied for a licence. I think they get the planning first, then you'd apply for the licence.
I've not seen one cross my papers.
Right, Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, as a resident of Sawbridgeworth, I'm actually very concerned about this planning application. And while I do agree, it'd be great to bring a historical, because it is really quite a landmark building in Sawbridgeworth, it'd be great to bring that back into use. I'm really actually very concerned how you can say, listening to your Class C description, I personally think that's far too wide. How can you compare a restaurant, or what this will become a nightclub, to what was a bank? The hours of operation, the noise, all the facilities, the parking, they're just incomparable. They're not, it's not like for like. There are so many, I say there's so many concerns. There's one about the live music. I frequently get complaints from residents about the Queen's Head pub. And I'm always constantly telling them to go to the environmental health team, because they do have live music occasionally, and it is outside and it is incredibly noisy. So does the Bell Pub. You mentioned this is a mixed commercial area. There are 3, and the rest is residential. How can Knight Street be classed as a mixed commercial area? It is residential. You talk about parking, about they'll walk to the car park. Can I just say, I'm a volunteer of the library, which is down the Forbury, 50 metres away from this application. Now, we're a community-run library, we're all volunteers. Now, our car park, we have 6 spaces in our car park, always full of people going to the Queen's Head pub. You cannot say people are going to park elsewhere. They will park anywhere around the local streets. It will become a nuisance. I know you say this isn't a planning issue, but it's all cumulative, and it is about the residents, making it acceptable for residents. And listening to all these points, I can't see how this can be acceptable as a planning application. There are just too many things against it. And it is opposite an infant school. Bearing in mind, they are very young children at that school. Is this the sort of thing we want? I just have too many concerns with this.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I think at the risk of repeating what other people have said, this was my concern prior to the meeting. There is a different sort of picture, which was actually from Councillor Parsad-Wyatt's submission on the portal, which shows that photograph, but with residential properties highlighted in a different colour to commercial properties. And that makes it look very different. You can see very clearly that it is predominantly residential. This is the real sticking point for me, is that I can see that there are other commercial properties there, but when you're looking at where the town centre is, this building is moving further away out of town towards an area which should be expected to be quieter. So that is an issue for me. The parking as well, I still don't quite understand. I know that there is a standard for that, and the details in 8.41 detail a real shortfall in parking spaces. And I think Councillor Buckmaster is correct. It's an accumulation of small things which may not be grounds for refusal, but there are a few of them beginning to mount up, which I'm still not quite happy with.
Councillor Stowe.
Thank you. Because the Class E, we could have a restaurant there and there'd be but the parking issue is not just solely to this application, because if they use the building with the Class E, there could still be as much parking. But my concern is noise, really. And I feel rather uncomfortable about the fact it's 7 days a week. In most areas where you get loud music, there is some restriction on a Sunday. And that's what I'd like to see, some restriction. I mean, midnight on a Sunday, which I think has been talked about in the report, is excessive. You know, I don't think that's really fair in that situation. I grant you it's a mixed area. There's shops there and everything else, and this is a commercial building, used as a bank previously and got other uses. But the noise is, I think, is an issue. I mean, I don't quite understand the concerns about the refuge, because there's a little private road there. There's houses down there, and they must have had a bin cart that goes up the road there to get the bins, or they bring them out to the pavement at the front. I can't imagine that would be the case because the pavement's so narrow it causes obstruction. So I'm not quite sure. Perhaps you could give us more on that as well, please.
So I'll firstly start off with the parking queries that were brought up. So officers do note that the proposed change of use could result in an increase in on-street parking in the area, and there is an under-provision of parking provided on site. However, it's important to note that it's not uncommon for uses located within a town centre or near a town centre to have an under-provision of parking. As previously highlighted, the site is in a sustainable location in close proximity to various uses of public transport. And as highlighted, the site is in close proximity to Bell Street car park. As highlighted in the presentation as well, the fact that the site has a Class E fallback, the use of the building, which could be done without planning permission, as a cafe or restaurant, would create a similar demand for parking to the use proposed in front of us today. The venue also wouldn't operate at full capacity throughout the day. So also, I note there will be certain periods of time where there'll be potentially an increase of on-street parking for the various reasons sort of set out, together with the fact that the Highways Authority don't consider there to be a significant increase in traffic with the proposed change of use. We'd consider that refusing the application on parking would form an insufficient reason for refusal. Going back to the mixed use sort of query again, which we sort of briefly addressed already, it is in the officer's viewpoint that Knight Street is mixed use in nature. Whilst I do note there are various neighbouring properties and residential properties around the site, it is officer's viewpoint that it is a mixed use street. In terms of the noise, as Claire, my colleague, has already sort of set out, the noise report that's been sort of submitted does say that it would be inaudible for neighbouring properties. And whilst I do note that the outdoor seating area has the potential to generate noise, which neighbouring properties could hear, it is limited, and as sort of already set out, it is located between the flank wall of the host building and the boundary wall, which actually sort of is adjacent to the outdoor seating area for the Queen's Head pub. And also the condition, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but there is the hours of use condition, does ensure that the external seating area would be closed from 11 o'clock onwards 7 days a week, whereas on Fridays and Saturdays, the use is until midnight. So we've imposed that condition to protect the residential amenity of neighbouring properties. In terms of refuse, it's important to note that the location of the waste and storage is where it was for the previous use as a bank. I note that Rowan's Walk is a narrow road, but bins could be brought up onto Knight Street to be emptied if the refuse vehicle could not get down Rowan Walk. Officers consider that that's a suitable and sort of practical approach that the applicant could take. In terms of servicing, because I feel like potentially a question might come up with that in the future, and sort of whilst talking about waste, etc., it's be useful to sort of cover that off. The site, there is a goods vehicle loading bay outside of the front of 24 Knight Street, which is more or less adjacent to the site, which could be utilised for servicing for the proposed use as well. I think that's covered off all the comments. I'm happy to answer if there are any that I've missed.
I think
Councillor-
I mentioned about the Sunday.
Yes, I think the opening hours proposed under the condition are 11 o'clock on a Sunday. I think it's midnight on Friday and Saturday. It's 11 o'clock on a Sunday.
Can I just go? Could that be further limited by a licensing application?
Yes, so the hours of operation can be limited through licensing, but also the hours of the operation of any live music. You know, the sale of alcohol is also a licensing process that wouldn't be an automatic, just because it gets planning permission. That doesn't necessarily follow that it gets licensing permission for the sale of alcohol or live music. I think what you've heard today as well about the inaudible controls, that does address, you know, our advice to you is that addresses the noise concerns satisfactorily, and that is something that is afforded as a result of this application being made to the local planning authority. If we were dealing with other uses such as the pub next door, that could potentially give rise to greater concerns and an inability of the local authority to control it, therefore harder to respond to concerns of residents, councillors and interested groups. And one thing I'd just like to emphasise quickly about the use classes order, and I'm deliberately listed the full Class E because that was changed in 2020, really as a response to the government wanting to promote flexibility, viability and variety within high streets and town centres, and it was to promote kind of economic stimulus in those areas. And the previous use classes order A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, B1, etc. was unnecessarily difficult to sort of navigate around, and so it put a lot of uses under pressure to change or apply for planning permission every time. And so the thinking was that Class E that was brought in 2020 was to improve the flexibility to go from one class to another without requiring planning permission, which has made it easier to change the use without having to undertake further actions. And so in this instance, we've got a sui generis use, which is, as I've sort of said several times now, is about affording the ability to control the use in planning terms, but also there are further elements of the licensing regime which controls those other areas of concern that residents, that members have all raised, quite legitimately today, and will be subject to further consideration through a licensing process.
Councillor Estop.
That's very helpful from the officers in terms of use class, and also in terms of the waste, the bin area, the outside area. I have a little bit of a concern about people spilling into the car park. That's thing, but that's all been very helpful. I just wanted to make a kind of neutral observation first, which is that people keep using the term nightclub. I don't think this is a nightclub. It goes till 11 or 12. So it's basically an evening use. And the second thing is that there's a comedy club that meets that's about monthly or so in Bishop Stortford. They have about 200 people at a time. There's no parking. People get there, they seem to be walking or using public transport, because I've not been aware of parking issues, and there's never any antisocial behaviour, and I think that's just worth bearing in mind. I think that Knight Street is a great street, obviously one of the best streets in the district. It's got massive variety. It is mainly residential, but it is mixed, but we want to protect the character of Knight Street. I go along, actually, I agree with comments I read about the current use is not broadly compatible. I think that's something that I would agree with, and I do agree that it's outside that retail protection area. But there are two things really. One is that this is an existing commercial building. That is a key starting point. And the second is that, yes, Knight Street is in reality in the town centre, and it is a mixed use street because first of all, traffic comes along Bell Street and then goes along Knight Street. Knight Street is always quite busy. There's people going around a lot, and that's because of the other activities. As well as the school, opposite is the library and the memorial hall. And in the hall, you have events. And then you go down the street, there's another pub, the George, and then you've got Dorrington's. And so people are using that street as a means to get to other destinations. Dorrington's is effectively a town centre store. So because of those things, because so it's residential, absolutely, when you go into the side streets. And that's where you really feel that sensitivity. But Knight Street is I see it as a busy part of a vibrant town. I see this as potentially being an addition to a vibrant town. And I think that most of the measures, the conditions and so on frame it adequately. I think it could be an addition because live entertainment is culture. But I have a couple of, my main reservation is that we don't actually know what we mean by live entertainment. That really worries me. I feel that we don't have enough information. And my inclination is to ask the applicants to tell us, and I would rather defer this to find out what they mean by live entertainment and what the programming and management that would be. I have a small concern about whether the upstairs is self-contained. If that continues to be an office, it doesn't seem to be self-contained. It seems to be you go up from the bottom. It's next to a pub. If you live in a town centre, which effectively people do, then you have to expect that there's activity as well as residential gorgeousness. But my real concern is that we don't know what we're approving in terms of live entertainment.
Councillor Carter.
Sorry, thank you. Yes. My question was, so it's been very helpful to hear about the sort of licensing, the balance between licensing and planning permission. So I was just wondering, just for clarification, it's probably quite a basic question, but things such as, for example, noise can spill out of doors, for example, is that a licensing condition to sort of, for example, request that doors are kept closed during the summer so that we don't have noise spilling out of them? Is that licensing, or would that fall within this planning permission, just for clarity?
Hi, it actually, in this case, they have added it as part of their noise management plan. So it's part of the conditions on the planning permission, but it's certainly a condition that would be added on the licence application as well. And as part of the mitigation on the planning permission that we're looking at today, they've requested 2 acoustic doors and an internal lobby to prevent noise breakout on the ingress and egress.
Thank you. And if there are sort of issues with noise if there were to be issues with noise, that would be addressed through complaints to environmental health. Is that right?
Yes, and if they were significant, you can also call it into review under the Licensing Act as well. So the licence could be called into review for noise breaches as well as environmental health. But as mentioned, inaudibility is a much stricter criteria than statutory nuisance. So they'd be in breach of their planning conditions first before they'd be in breach. So it's quite a unique situation where we've got more control than we pretty much have over any venue in the district.
Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question on paragraph 8.27. It says you actually haven't had a noise assessment report for the air source heat pump. Now, knowing that other planning applications that have air source heat pumps have to include a noise assessment report, I'm concerned, why has this one not included one? Because how can we assess all the suitability of the application if we haven't got all the facts before us?
think there was a condition, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. So there is a condition. I'm going to find out which number it is. So it's condition 6. Is prior to the occupation of external plant at the
Yeah,
development, which is
sorry, I don't think it's actually good enough to just say prior to occupation. Surely.
prior to operation. Sorry,
Operation,
of
sorry.
the SLC.
When we've had other applications, that is always has to be submitted before we actually grant planning permission. So that's why I can't understand why it hasn't been this time.
Claire will answer that question. Sorry.
I think in situations where us as officers pretty much know that the air source heat pump wouldn't be an issue and it's really manageable by condition, because the background levels in the area where the plant is situated, etc. It's not appropriate for us to ask for it prior to permission being granted. We can only ask for things prior to permission being granted if they might be a deal breaker and unable to be achieved under condition.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, I really don't understand that when we've had other applications before us and that have gone for officers, and they all have to have this assessment before the planning application is granted. So I'm just not sure why this one's being allowed not to have it.
I mean, sometimes inspectors don't uphold these conditions that this council recommends because they don't always meet the tests. In this case, you've heard from my colleague in environmental health as for the reason for why it isn't necessary in this particular occasion, and we do have to consider everything on its own merits. And this occasion, because of the location of the equipment, it isn't being considered or hasn't been assessed as being a contributor to the noise, adverse noise conditions in the area, and therefore the condition number 6, which limits the noise in accordance with the background noise level, is considered sufficient to overcome that issue. And so we've undertaken assessment on this application on its merits and have come up with this recommended condition accordingly.
Councillor Copley.
First of all, I just want to say I still don't think that it is a mixed use. I know what Councillor Estop said about it. I don't think anybody would think that Dorrington's is part of the town centre. I mean, you might grab something when you're on your way back from school, but it's not a destination, a town centre type thing. And I think it's different in terms of the comedy club. That's in the centre of Bishop Stortford. What you're saying is you want to change the centre of Salisbury to something else if you want to do that. But sorry, my question to officers was about, do we have to take into account the infant school, which is directly opposite? And what kind of consideration have we given to that? Because obviously it would be a very different venue, and it is directly opposite. You've got the crossing, basically. Kids could go across into it. Hopefully they won't. But anyway, I just wanted to ask that question. Thank you.
Yeah, so of course we had taken into consideration, neighbouring properties, etc., including the infant school. But one thing to sort of point out is obviously I know that hours of operation are from 8 a.m. till 11 on every day except Friday and Saturdays when it's midnight. I understand there will be increased comings and goings and people walking along the street. If they're using the live entertainment, venue, then they potentially could be intoxicated, etc. However, it's important to note that would be outside of school times. And I think, as my colleague mentioned earlier as well, that there are certain things that are controlled under licensing as well that planning can't control. What we control is the hours of operation, etc., and the other conditions that we've sort of put forward in this report.
Okay, even though you said it was 8 a.m. to 11, but that's before school starts. So surely there could be people intoxicated if you go there at 8 a.m. by the time they get there at 9. I personally couldn't manage it, but
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's to go back to that point about the Class E use, and it's effectively a restaurant cafe and that has permission to sell alcohol.
But I think it's slightly different.
Obviously, most venues of the type that we're seeing on the screen here, you notice that the size of the little stage in the corner, it's a very different type of venue to a concert hall or a theatre, isn't it? And so we've got to sort of try and put that into some perspective here, I think. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, a cafe tends to do business in the daytime, and a restaurant probably would do business at lunchtime. And so the school hours are, you know, not going to conflict with the restaurant and cafe use, potentially. In terms of the, you know, the entertainment use, then I believe that's going to, the likelihood is that will go on in later evening hours when the schools are closed. And so I think it's an important consideration, because you are going to have school children, you know, in the area in the morning and in the afternoon. We don't envisage that's going to cause a problem in this location.
But do we actually have that detail from the person who's putting forward the application that will be how it's worked?
Well, that again, that will be subject to licensing applications, and obviously most venues that we see are comparable of this nature don't tend to have live music in the daytime. So that's not to say that they won't ever do that, but if it's more likely to be on weekends, if you do get it again, that isn't going to conflict with the, you know, the school hours. The school is an important consideration, though, and you know, it is.
I'm concerned.
It is worth considering in your deliberation on this.
Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you. I do wonder whether the officers actually have ever been down Knight Street at 8 o'clock in the morning, or even 8 o'clock in the evening, because at 8 o'clock in the morning, they're the lollipop lady standing outside what was Barclays Bank, and you cannot get a car down there because, well, obviously everyone in Sobishworth, whoever uses that road, it's double parked, and you are literally trying to get one car past another. It's a nightmare in the morning and again in the evenings. So those opening hours concern me, because at that point of the morning, there is so many children walking around and crossing that road. I know you're saying it's a licensing, you know, then I think it needs to go back to licensing, because that is just really not acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, so the planning system would, you know, we might be a consultee on the licensing application along with my colleagues in environmental health, but, you know, just because a planning permission is granted doesn't follow that licensing will follow. And in terms of the hours of operation, you know, we you know, at the moment we don't know what this operator is going to you know, do you know, from 8 o'clock in the morning. If it's selling coffee, then you're going to get comings and goings. And I think, you know, the reference to being busy at that time in the morning again reinforces that this is a edge of town centre area that contains other uses. And so I think that with the commercial use of the existing building, former use, a bank, and with that ability to operate within all those use classes within E, we think that is a valid consideration and a point to consider this application against when coming to review.
Councillor Stowe.
I think it's worth remembering that these people that run this place, they're not going to put on live entertainment in the middle of the day, because it can cost them money to get it there. Nobody will turn up. People do work for a living, don't they? And the sort of people that have got the money to go there, I think that's a bit of a red herring. I think it'd be evening entertainment. And during the day, I mean, there's a pub recently in one of the villages I look after where it's been bought by the village, and they're going to sort of have it open during the day as well. But it'd be like, you know, afternoon teas and coffees and stuff like that, just to keep the place turning, and the drinks will come and the meals in the evening. I don't know if it's valid or not, but I think, you know, we've got to be sensible about it. It's a commercial building. It's got the permission to use it for a restaurant they want to, and nothing we can do about it. So we've got to talk about it with that in mind, I'd have thought.
Councillor Estop.
Chair, we've been asked to consider local needs and concerns, and I've certainly been trying to do that. My own personal view is that a use of this scale in this particular building in this location is okay. I support it in principle, and I believe that what we've heard from the officers and what we've heard from environmental health about licensing, I believe that frames it. But I would like to propose that we defer it to get more information about the operation so that we understand that better. I think there are some other bits and pieces as well as what live entertainment is. So I'd like to propose a deferral.
Could I ask officers what a deferral what would be the consequences of a deferral?
I mean, in this case, we would have to go back to the applicant and set out what their exactly what Councillor Istop has asked for, and other members of the planning committee, and people making representations, councillors making representations, more information about how they intend to operate the use. You know, certainly my initial response would be the information that we're likely to come back is likely to be stuff which will be covered through licensing regimes, and that will cover, you know, information about the type of music or comedy or entertainment that's being provided. It may set out, you know, a plan for daytime use. I think they've said something in the planning application about daytime use as a cafe, I believe, or a restaurant, and then in the evening it has a, you know, the option of live music. It's all stuff that, you know, is subject to licensing controls, but I think if it helps members come to a determination on the application, then it's something that we can accept. So.
Oh, sorry, can I just come in on that as well? I mean, obviously, as the planning officer said, we've got to articulate the reasons for the deferral, and if that's what members feel that they need to come to a decision on the particular application. But I just wanted to ask officers about the statutory time period for determination, because are we outside of the statutory time period, or are you still within it? Because that will have I'll need to advise the committee on possible non-determination appeal.
So this application we've had for just over a year now. So technically we've got an extension of time, I think, till next week. So technically we're still within an active determination period. However, if members are wanting to defer the application, it's something that we potentially could get another extension of time agreement, subject to the applicant agreeing that.
Obviously, just to let members aware that we won't know if the members, if the applicant will agree that extension of time. They're obviously not here this evening to ask. So obviously just bear that in mind in terms of, you know, obviously if you need that further information, and a deferral is what the committee wishes to propose this evening. But obviously I just have to advise you that, bearing in mind what the officers have said about the time frame to determination, there may be a potential risk that the applicant might appeal for non-determination if you don't determine it this evening. But I just have to advise you of that.
Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you. Can I actually just bring up a point on condition 10? You've got hours for the working, you know, the construction and the conversion, as 8 o'clock in the morning to 1800 hours, 6 o'clock of an evening. Can you add into that condition, not during the school drop off and pick up? Because I say 8 o'clock in the morning on Knight Street, you cannot move, and it's untenable.
There's probably not enough construction work in the building to warrant that level of restriction on a condition. That would be my suspicion. If it was a much bigger development, then perfectly right to ask for that sort of control. But for a development that's alterations to of the scale proposed, it wouldn't be invasive in that regard.
Councillor Stowe.
I'd like to propose something different, actually. And the concern with the school would be delivery times. So if we actually had a condition saying that no deliveries to the site or collections from the site by vehicles, lorries, during the school delivery time and collection time. Now, that would be reasonable.
Could I just clarify if that's to do with servicing or during construction?
I'm thinking of during construction, delivery of materials, because they're allowed to be on big trucks, parking out on the road. So if we could put down, they've got to avoid that school time. I mean, I don't know school times, but some people will.
I mean, again, I think we're talking about white vans, the scale of the development that's coming, probably not trucks with, you know, large vehicles. So just with
about lining the walls with this fleece and then the fibre board, that will come on a lorry, won't come in a white van.
Yeah. It probably wouldn't meet, in our view, the proportional test for the scale of development. I mean, there's the ongoing servicing and drop-offs and deliveries. Maybe that is something that can be coordinated with the school hours, so that we don't end up with conflicts in those times, because that's something that has potential to, for a refuse truck, or not a refuse truck, but a delivery service vehicle to have an impact there. That's something that could be considered.
So members, do we like that condition on service deliveries, avoiding school opening and closing times? Should we, well, I propose we add that condition. Anyone want to second me? And shall we, Councillor Hill, and shall we vote on that for? We're voting on a condition. And those against? Oh, sorry, hands up for, sorry, we missed for.
1, 2, 4. No, 2. Everyone. Yeah. Extra condition only.
Yeah, that's just for that extra condition. We still have a proposal on the Councillor Stowe.
We just need officers to help us word that properly before we can approve it.
Sure. Can we have could you, we just need some help wording that condition.
The servicing and delivery condition, I think it would be a requirement to submit a servicing and delivery strategy, and within it that would include details of the hours of operation for the servicing and delivery. And I suppose we could have some form of words that would say, shall seek to avoid conflict over in school hours, or it's clear that that's what the intention of the committee's decision is to do. And so whether that restriction forms in the wording of the condition, but the ability to approve or refuse a delivery and servicing strategy is something that we would have if we added that condition. So something along those lines is what we would be comfortable with, and that is capable of meeting the test.
I just noticed one member's left to the toilet, so we're. I was going to call for an adjournment.
Oh yeah, you're going to call for.
So I propose. Do we want to? What do you call it? Comfort break. I propose 2-minute adjournment. Did anyone second?
There might be a queue for them.
Five. I'm told 5. I propose 5 minutes. Second and 4. Against? No one. Okay.
No discussion, please. Make that clear.
Yeah, careful. No discussion. Okay, we're all back. Right.
Your life. Okay.
Okay, so do I have any more people wanting to speak? Councillor Stowe.
I think we'd like to speak about B, if we're going to go on to that one as well.
No, we've got a.
We're going to do them together, are we, or what?
No, we're not going to do them together.
Right,
but
okay,
we've
that's
got
fine.
already got a proposal for
Seconded.
a deferral,
Seconded.
but it's not seconded. Are we minded to go for any other proposals?
Obviously, before we go to proposal, just re-emphasise what I said before about we don't know whether or not the applicant will appeal for non-determination, which could go into a planning appeal, which could potentially result in costs. But again, if the committee feel they want to defer and they can give reasons, because the reasons will need to be recorded as part of the proposal. So just wanted to make that clear.
Councillor Hill.
All right, so I haven't said anything yet, but one of the things, one of the concerns I've heard raised, I think would be addressed at the licensing committee. But I'm not really supportive of deferral, because I think actually the licensing committee will deal with the issues raised.
Councillor Estop, do you want to go back on that?
Thank you. Just on that particular point, if this did go to decision, I would suggest that that licensing is referred to in the informatives, because it's not explicitly referred to in the informatives, and I think that would be helpful. No, I think, yes, I'm mindful if I propose deferral, I'm mindful of that risk. They might appeal against non-determination. I've heard very clearly that the applicant has had requests to provide information and has not responded. And we've not had the benefit of hearing from them this evening, after they've seen the report and everything. So I don't think it's unreasonable to say we haven't been satisfied with the information that we've got, and therefore we need it, and then it means that we can make a decision properly on planning grounds, land use grounds.
Councillor Stowe.
I feel very uncomfortable about deferral, because the issues that we're more concerned about are issues that would most certainly be dealt with through licensing. That is hours, things like the antisocial behaviour, all this be tied up with licensing, and we can't really put anything in a condition that will cover that. But they can, because they can. The police can actually ask for the licence to be reviewed if it's not been adhered to, and I mean, I know there's been a case recently where police got involved on one. It was a big open air concert place, and they got quite strong about it, and it worked. They can't just walk over it. The licence is actually, in a way, almost in these situations in licensed premises, it's far more powerful than planning. Because bear in mind that the situation we've already got Class C, and I keep saying this, I know, but that is quite an important part, because that means they can still open it as a restaurant and presumably apply for a licence for drink, and all those things could still happen, and that would increase the amount of people going there. Car problem would be the same, and the only difference is it's not live entertainment, but then they could apply for that through the licence then, like the pub could next door.
Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you. I think I actually had to say I disagree with Councillor Stowe on this, and I think there are too many issues that we are concerned about that aren't actually covered by licensing, and so I actually am going to second the proposal for deferment. And the reasons are because we need more information, and because obviously the client wasn't here tonight.
Yeah, information about what?
Opening hours, the usage.
Councillor Estop.
Could I add to that? The the nature, the range of activities that would be in live entertainment. So, you know, the difference between a rock band and a jazz band, or folk music, or spoken word, poetry, comedy, that sort of thing. And then secondly, the anticipated programming. Would this be once a week? Would it be every single night? Or what do they envisage? Because the third thing is, how would it be managed? Who is managing the live performance? All those things go together, and I think that that's relevant to understanding the land use and the whether it would work or not.
Can I ask officers, are all these things that would be, actually maybe I'll ask the is this a licensing issue that Councillor Estop has brought up? Can we?
Yes, under licensing, they have to state what they wish to do, times of music, etc., etc. And under the D-Reg, they can do other things as well. I don't think it's possible in planning terms for us to restrict them under planning law to a certain timetable of use, that they can only have live music every Tuesday evening, Saturday evening. I don't think that's possible under planning law. All of this normally falls under licensing. We've never dealt with it under planning.
They all are licensable activities, which will be covered under the licensing legislation.
Yeah, I mean, just to come in on Councillor Estop's questions, seconded by Councillor Buckmaster. Yeah, when it comes to the planning assessment and the licensing, there is a sort of area for crossover, and you know, it is a challenge to sort of, you know, draw the line where the planning legislation sort of starts and where the licensing regime kind of begins. And you know, as you've heard, you know, we've had, you know, multiple dialogue with the applicant on this one, and it wouldn't be unusual to see this type of planning application have a lot of information provided. If it was a sensitive land use, which it is, it's not uncommon for the applicant to justify the application by providing exactly the types of information that councillors are asking for today. However, in planning terms, there isn't the planning legislative framework to control the sort of live music, operational hours, or sale of alcohol, or you know, how a premises is operated, or like this to be within. And so, whilst the information that has been asked, I'm sure, you know, will be helpful for everybody to get a flavour of what the change of use will be, it stretches well outside of the planning remit into the licensing remit. And so I think I completely understand why the information is sought, but that isn't going to result in additional planning controls that come of it. And so whilst it's helpful to understand, you know, we don't feel that it would lead us to a different set of controls that we've discussed today, or that we could even seek to you know, add further controls that were on the back of that information being provided. And so, as Councillor Stowe sort of alluded, you know, it's an uncomfortableness that a deferral would bring if that information came back, which might be helpful, but ultimately it's unlikely to, you know, to result in further controls. But completely understand, you know, the sensitivity and why that information would be helpful, and you know, why we've asked for some of that information before. So.
You're not invited to speak. Sorry. Councillor Copley.
I was going to say, I would also be uncomfortable with the deferment given the tight time frame we've got, and if the applicant doesn't agree to an extension, then we could end up with some serious issues here.
Okay, I'm minded to call for a vote on this. We've had a proposal, and it's been seconded for deferral, for the reasons to elicit more information regarding the uses to be put in under licensing terms. So, do I have a vote to approve? vote to, no, sorry, vote to approve the deferral, sorry, yes. Hands up, clearly.
1, 2,
And against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that falls 10, it's gone.
That falls. So I think I'm going to propose approval. Does somebody second? Councillor Hill and Hans for approval.
Can you just clarify exactly what we're approving?
All right, yes,
at this moment?
we're voting now.
Thanks.
To approve 5A only with the condition amendment as voted for earlier. And that's been proposed and seconded. So can I have a show of hands to grant?
I'm really not clear what I'm voting on here. So if you
All right,
could just explain.
So this is for
again.
5A to grant approval for the application with the condition, with the amendment to the condition as discussed earlier. Hands up for, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 6.
And against?
3.
And abstentions. Okay, so approval is granted for 5A only. We're moving on now to 5B, which is I'll read it properly here. This is the listed building consent for 3/23/21/85 LBC. Insertion of partition walls, flooring, kitchen stroke prep area, stage bar, external flue and food storage area. Alterations to first floor WCs to include removal of bath, relocation of sinks and insertion of toilets, installation of 3 external signage, new screen fence, acoustic works including the installation of secondary glazing and noise absorption and erection of rear canopy at 28 Knight Street, Sobridgeworth.
I think you've done a presentation already.
Yes,
No speakers.
there are no speakers and we've already had the presentation. I'm minded to ask the officer, is there any recap you can give us just on specifically listed building consent?
I can give a brief recap on the parts of the scheme that require listed building consent. So just find the correct page, just give me 1 second. So firstly, the description of development, I'll sort of just quickly recap. So it's for, in fact, I think Chair just went over, you just outlined the description of development. Apologies, yeah. So in terms of the works, the council's conservation officer was consulted on the application as obviously set out in the presentation earlier. Obviously, a number of alterations internally are proposed to the Grade 2 listed building, and they did conclude that the alterations would result in less than substantial harm to the listed building. Those elements specifically which they're relating to there is through the brickwork which would need to be removed in order to install the flue at the rear of the site, and also part of the internal building walls that would need to be amended in order to make the internal arrangement more symmetrical for the proposed use. Although they did note that it would result in less than substantial harm to the listed building, it would be at the lower end of the scale. And they considered that the significant public benefit of bringing the listed building back into use, supporting the long-term preservation of the heritage asset and the economic benefits to arise out of the commercial use, together with a positive impact on supporting the vibrant and mixed-use area, would outweigh any harm to the significance of the heritage asset, and therefore they raised no objection subject to the conditions listed at the end of the committee report for listed building consent.
Thank you. Councillor Stowe.
Yes, talking about the front elevation, there is some brickwork there on the front elevation that is in a very poor condition. And I want the assurance that we will use matching brick of an imperial dimension. And if the arches need any repair work, then we must use rubbers as they are at the moment done with lime mortar. Can that be assured?
So the description of development doesn't actually propose any work to the front elevation, i.e. repair works. So I don't think that is something that we would be able to condition through this application because it doesn't sort of fall within the remits of what's proposed. So if that's something that the applicant wanted to come forward to do, they need to have conversations with the conservation team to see if that would require consent and what scale of works would be required in order to sort of sort out those repairs.
I find that amazing because one can push their fingers through the windows at the front. They're so rotten. So all those have got to be changed.
Yeah, that would have to be subject to a separate application, I understand.
Yeah, so if the works that would be required in order to sort of repair the section of wall that you're discussing, if they're not considered to be repair works by the conservation team, that would need to be subject of a separate listed building consent application.
Members, I think a lot of this centres around alterations to the internal walls, and these are internal walls that are already been substantially altered and wouldn't be a material consideration. Well, I don't know. Can you can you cover that, because I'm obviously a little bit confused. But I understand that in a listed building, when a building's listed, there's a description given, and some of it mention the outside exterior, and some of it will be the interior. But it's quite limited what's covered by this interior description. Is that right?
Yeah, so any internal alterations to a listed building do require listed building consent, which is why we have this application along with the full application. The conservation team, in their response, noted that extensive works have altered internal room proportions over time, and that has reduced the overall significance of the heritage asset, and therefore it allows greater flexibility with the internal layout changes. And like I said, except from the small element at the front of the building, internally being altered in order to make more of a symmetrical layout, the walls that they'd be removing, etc., in order to create the proposed internal partitions, they don't consider to have significance, and therefore they have raised no objections to the insertion of those partition walls.
Members, also we're being asked to balance up some things. Is my understanding that we have the less than substantial harm or changing of the listed building, and with the bringing the building back into use and effectively looking after the building for the foreseeable. Councillor Estop.
Chair, I'm happy to take the advice that the officers have received. They've sought expert advice, listed building advice. That's my inclination.
Any other members want to make a contribution here? Councillor Carter, sorry.
Yes, I think it's just a good idea. It's encouraging to see a building being brought back into use rather than being left empty, and I think that does outweigh the any harm to any minor harm to the listed building.
Okay, does anyone want to add anything, or are we going to go straight for Councillor Buckmaster?
Yes, can I then ask, because obviously I'm concerned about the window frames, because as Councillor Stowe said, they are rotten.
Yeah.
And some of the brickwork needs repointing and things like that. I know it's not as part of this listed building consent, but obviously if the conservation officers then decide it needs work doing to it, will the applicant be required to do that work?
So the conservation team haven't put forward any comments to say that works are required to those windows in the comments that we've received for this application. And as I sort of stated, that if the applicant is wanting to do those works, then likely a listed building consent application, a separate one, would need to come forward for those. It's like I said, it's not something that we could impose via a condition under this listed building consent application.
It's automatic that if they do anything to listed building, it needs consent. So if they want to place a window, they need to apply for listed building consent to do so.
Councillor Estelp.
This still bugs me. It's raised it in the last item. How do occupiers of the upstairs offices get there? It doesn't help that these two diagrams are the wrong way round. But could you explain? Could officers explain how people will get into the upstairs? Because if that remains in a different use.
So yeah, there are a number of entrances to the building. Obviously, we have the front entrance off of Knight Street. We have a side entrance off of Rowan Walk, and then we also have the entrance through the rear canopy. So the likelihood, from my understanding, is that they would probably access via Rowan Walk that side entrance up to the first floor rear.
And it's my understanding that the signage isn't covered in this application either, is that right?
So the signage forms part of the listed building consent application. It doesn't form part of the full application. However, the applicant would need to submit an advertisement consent application for that, and that is covered by an informative on both the listed building consent and the full application, informing the applicant of that.
Okay, the way we're going, if we don't have any conditions or informatives we'd like to add to this. Oh, Councillor Stowe.
I'd like to propose we accept.
Okay, do I have a seconder?
Yes.
Yeah, Councillor Carter. And votes to approve listed building consent.
Everyone.
So that's granted for 3/23/2185 listed building consent. And moving on to 5C. That this is 3/23/1641 FUL, the demolition of existing buildings and erection of Barn 1 office accommodation and 6 units of overnight accommodation with 16 beds in total for staff, volunteers and students working on the farm site. Barn 2, 12 self-contained holiday cottages, outbuilding for shower and laundry facilities. That's class 3, but occupation restricted to short stays only. Barn 3, 3 retail workshops, that's class E. And Barn 4, learning and meeting event space with kitchen and 2 offices at first floor, that's class F and class E. And erection of 6 dwellings, class 3, widening of access and footpath and associated car parking provision at Church Farm, Moor Green Road, Ardderley, Stevenage, Hertfordshire. And I'm going to invite Steve Fraser-Lim to present the application.
Thank you, Chair. This is wider view of Church Farm here, just to the south of Moor Green Road. The access, and you've got this Church Farm shop at the front of the site, and the vehicle access goes around the side of that. You can see there's a wider area of the farm to the south as well, but that is not part of the red line plan, as we'll see. Next slide, please. So this is the red line plan, which covers the farmyard area of the site, which currently contains a range of different buildings, mobile homes, other structures used by a number of different businesses on the site. Next slide, please. This is the view site from the Moor Green Roads. Next slide, please. The entrance to the farm shop, which is just outside the red line area and not changed by the application. Next slide, please. And inside the shop, next slide, please. And this is the vehicle access, which goes into the farmyard round the side of the shop. Next slide, please. And then this is a view within the farmyard, and you can see a number of the existing buildings on site, and sort of office buildings, plus a sort of larger barn type structure, plus on the right hand side you'll see some mobile homes as well. Next slide, please. And again, next slide, please. Next slide, please. So you can see, you know, the existing condition of the buildings is poor, and quite unattractive, and noted to be a detract from the appearance of the conservation area. Next slide, please. And again, you can see some of the mobile homes there on the opposite side. Next slide, please. And then School Lane sort of goes down the side of the site to the west, and there are some views which would be possible from School Lane across to the site. So those existing buildings there, the application site's behind those. Next slide, please. And again, you can see you can just about see the existing buildings sort of poking up above that fence line there. Next slide, please. And again, on the opposite side of the school sort of play area. Next slide, please. And then School Lane sort of wraps around the southern side of the towards the south side of the site, and there's a bridleway which runs along the southern boundary of the application site, which you can just sort of see beyond those parked cars there. Next slide, please. And then just a longer view from the south looking back towards the farm, which is the farmyard area, which is screened by the existing trees and vegetation. Next slide, please. So the application proposals are to demolish those existing buildings and develop a number of new barn type buildings to accommodate the existing uses on the site. The farm is a community interest company, and it runs there's a number of different operations from it, including rural care, which provides internships and training and placement opportunities for people with learning disabilities or mental health problems. And there's also a number of other businesses that currently operate on the site, retail, offices, and also some sort of craft workshops as well. So the idea is to demolish those existing buildings and replace them with purpose-built accommodation for them. And in addition to that, there's also some holiday accommodation provided in Barn 2, and also housing as well. The application's very similar to a previous application that the committee considered back in 2023. The only difference between that application and the current one was the previous application proposed 3 houses, 3 dwellings on that. You can see that on the sort of top area of the site there, as part of the development to help improve the scheme viability. So that was approved back in 2023. This current application is to increase the number of dwellings there. So if we could, next slide, please. You can see that the rest of the site remains the same, but with the addition of those 3 extra dwellings on the top there, adjacent to School Lane. Next slide, please. These are some of the images of the barn buildings. There's no change to their design or size or anything. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The houses, this image, there has been a change in terms, this is the previously approved kind of appearance of the dwelling. Then that has changed in that they're now proposed to be entirely brick without the boarding. Next slide, please. And then the wider view of the wider site. Next slide, please. Elevations. I won't sort of go through perhaps every single one of these, but if members wanted to spend a bit more time, perhaps if we go to the next slide, please. Just to give a flavour of some of the floor plans of these buildings. So this is Barn 1, which is the centre of the site, and the intention is that this would be the reception area for the farms and the other businesses. So rural care and motive action. There's going to be some office space, meeting rooms, which is capable of being used by members of the public. Also desks that could be booked by people who wanted an sort of alternative location for home working. There's inclusion of 10 desk spaces as part within barn 1 as well. And then the upper parts of the barn are proposed to be used for accommodation for the placements that are taking place as part of rural care. So if people are staying on the farm to for placements or training, they would be accommodated in the upper parts of the building, also the back of the ground floor as well on barn 1. Next slide, please. This is the holiday let accommodation. It's just predominantly single story. There is a mezzanine with the bedroom above. Next slide, please. Toilet shower blocks proposed as well. Next slide, please. And barn 3, which is proposed around that sort of courtyard spaces, retail and workshops. Next slide, please. And barn 4 is further offices on ground floor and first floor as well. All the other matters are really sort of as set out in the report. The main difference between this application and the previous one is around that additional houses. There's additional 3 houses. There's a justification in the report as to why we consider that to be acceptable in terms of meeting the infill exception in policy GBR2. There's also the other matter, sort of another change in circumstances from the earlier application, is the council's 5-year housing land supply situation. Whereas in the previous application there was a 5-year housing land supply, we currently don't have a 5-year housing land supply, so that's addressed also in the report. We've attributed some limited positive weight to that, although we're only talking about 3 extra houses, so it's not a massive difference. So we don't see that as a sort of a major issue. But really, it comes down to this GBR2, and the kind of policy allows for infill development in sites like this. Previously, there was 3. We felt that it was a good idea to try and sort of keep that number down because it is a village, category 3 village, so one of the lower level villages in terms of accommodating new development. But we still feel that 6 still fits in with the pattern of development of the wider area and the houses around School Lane, and so we feel that's also still acceptable. There's a couple of amendments to the drawing numbers on the paragraphs 1.5 and 1.6 in the update report. All other matters are as set out in the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I would. Sorry. Okay, I have our next speaker for the application, Mr. Tim Waygood, representing the applicant.
He's the applicant.
Oh, you are the applicant, sorry. And you've got 3 minutes. Yes.
Hi, my name's Tim. I run Church Farm. Excuse my cold. Established in 2007, we run farm to fork hospitality, visitor and social care enterprises. We are a place for people and wildlife and have restored ancient fields and hedges. There are now 5 new woods, 5 ponds, soft fruit, horticulture, a walnut orchard and a heritage orchard growing apples, damsons, plums, gages, quince, medlar, cherry and crabapple and pears on the farm. We grow 40 varieties of vegetable and farm a little bit of every type of animal. Cattle, pigs, sheep, goats, ducks, chickens, laying hens. This is an ecological approach which has got people at its heart. It's visitors that eat the food produced on the farm in either the cafe, the pub we run opposite, or from the shop, and we deliver weekly round Hertfordshire food boxes. We run education and host schools and are a school for excluded pupils. Social care employs 30 people supporting 50 people each week with physical and mental health difficulties who help because everyone can meaningfully contribute. And overall, the diversified enterprises support over 60 paid jobs at the farm. This application is to redevelop the dilapidated hub. To redevelop the brownfield site, we consulted with everyone in the parish to help shape the plans. And as pointed out, this application is exactly the same as the previous one that was passed, except that it has now 6 smaller residential plots on the same land that had 3 larger plots. The revised application also includes enhanced building efficiency and sustainability as documented in the application. Overall, we feel this is a better, more efficient use of land and follows what local people said and gave their own overwhelming support to on the original application, which was for smaller plots. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, members. Councillor Stowe.
I've got a couple of bits I'd like clarifying. On the south entrance, the road, I know it's not part of the site, but the road outside is extremely poor. Now, is there any way we can get the applicant to improve that slightly? That was one. I couldn't see anything about secure locking for cycles. And I think we need secure locking to encourage people to use cycles rather than cars. I'll do them all together if you like, it'll be easier.
Yeah, go on.
I wanted to know if all the roads and footpaths are permeable surface, and if they are, I have concerns about, well, talk about the water being collected and going into existing waterways within the land. Now, if it's going to be the roads as well, then we need sort of interceptors to catch the grease and what have you comes off cars. I'd like assurance that would be dealt with in the drainage policy. I think that's all I've got at the moment. I'm sure. Well, that's right. The last one was where the accommodation blocks being built. At the moment, there's caravans there. I wanted assurance that these will be. I know they've got planning permission, but they'll be taken off the site and won't be replaced somewhere else without a planning application coming through.
Do you want to take those?
Bring up slide 15, please.
Members,
sorry, yeah, next.
Am I blocking anyone's view, by the way?
No, you can duck it.
So yeah, I think so. I think Councillor is referring to sort of this bridleway here. You've got a turning circle around the existing houses, and then it becomes a unpaved track, which you can see just beyond the cars. And the idea is that that section there, where it joins the southern entrance to the site, maybe if we bring up slide 18, please. So on the left-hand side of the slide, that's the south entrance into the site. So you've got the bridleway running along the back of that, just outside the red line. So there is a planning condition to require them to repave that bridleway from the site entrance to the existing footway in School Close, and where the sort of the road and the turning circle starts. And there's also a mention of bollards, I think, as well, to prevent parking on grass verges or kind of unsuitable vehicle access. In terms of the cycle parking, if we could bring up slide 34, please. So the applicants have submitted the details of the cycle enclosures along with the bin stores. There's 4 different cycle storage areas distributed around the site. In terms of the sort of cycle parking numbers, there's quite high provision. There's in excess of the standards, and so we feel the space that they've shown on these plans is quite, it's certainly generous enough in order to show that they can make a good provision for cycles. But what we can't see from these plans is the actual type of stands. Our preference is sort of LTN 120 and a guidance about workplace cycling is for Sheffield stands, not those sort of vertical racks or anything like that, which aren't very practical to use. So and also we don't know how the cover, the roof, lighting, security around that, the sort of lockable doors and gates and so on to the cycle store. So we've got a planning condition to secure those details, but we're very comfortable that there is sufficient space to make sure that there's good quality cycle parking provision that can be achieved as part of that condition details. In terms of the drainage, if we could go back to slide 18. We don't have, I haven't actually got the present as part of the presentation, the drainage strategy plan, but there is a general fall across the site from north to south. So surface water drainage will naturally sort of drain towards the south. The proposal is for areas of permeable paving. This is predominantly around the car parking area. And so water will drain into through the paving to below ground storage, where it will then be released at a slow rate to local watercourse, which is on the watercourse is on the farm off to the sort of the bottom left hand side of the slide. So as part of that process, as the water percolates through the permeable paving, there will be natural kind of filtration of pollutants and things, and there will also, it will be built to the sort of usual standards as well, where petrol interceptors and things. I think that's probably the caravans, yeah. So certainly within the red line area, the caravans that are within that red line area will be, they'll have to be removed to facilitate the development. So so we can be sure about that, because there's no way really to implement the development without removing them. If the applicant were to move those caravans to somewhere else on the farm, then we wouldn't necessarily, if that required planning permission where they were stored and how they were stored, then then the applicant would need to apply for planning permission, and if he didn't, we could take enforcement action. There may be opportunities to move them elsewhere that doesn't need planning permission, but then that's not something we can necessarily control as part of the application.
I know at the moment there's currently an enforcement going on about camping on the campus, so this would really come into that guise, really. I mean, you can't put half a dozen mobile homes down without getting some sort of permission, can you?
Yeah, most likely it would need planning permission. Can't say for sure until we know exactly sort of where they're going and what the justification is for them being there. I mean, I suppose it would be possible to put an informative on to say that the caravan shouldn't be removed elsewhere in the farm to result in any breach of planning control or something like that, or they could be liable for enforcement action.
Councillor Estop.
My main point is that I've got a real problem with the residential. I feel it's really uncomfortable to have 6 houses that, or whatever it is, that's drifted into. It's against policy in this area outside the defined areas, and I don't think that GBR2, it's such a thin justification. It's part E of GBR2. The report says, I don't see this as infill. This is a small estate of 6 houses. I really feel very uncomfortable. This might be justified a bit by the 5-year land supply. I mean, we had a very difficult debate last meeting about a serious housing development, and there's no way this kind of thing can be justified on the basis of 5-year land supply. And finally, the design is terrible of those houses. They are just suburban houses, one at a time, bunged in. They have no relationship with the rather excellent buildings that the barns are and the way that they've been organized. So it's alien to the rest of the development. So I've got a fundamental problem with the houses. But I wanted to also ask that there's no advice in here from about the rural economy. There's no, I mean, no consultees. I wonder who provides the advice on rural economy and what counts and what doesn't count. Because in order to support the farming that we've heard about, and to support the work with disabled people, people with learning difficulties, mental health issues, to support that mission, the rural care, there will be office space and retail and well, residential, but you know, what of those can be justified? The tourism side part of it, camping, how much of that it can be justified in terms of rural economy to support these the very worthwhile activities here?
Okay.
So in terms of the policy GBR2, I think in our view, we don't see it as conflicting with policy, particularly in terms of GBR2. That is it's a commonly sort of accepted form of development in the rural area that you may have infilling development. This site is a brownfield site. It was a former farmyard. It's a brownfield site that's been previously developed within the settlement boundary. So we feel that policy GBR2 does allow for infill development in those circumstances. In terms of, I suppose, there is policy, we have to consider also policy Bill 3, which is more restrictive about development in the category 3 villages because they're generally seen to have sort of less access to facilities and services and things. And that policy Bill 3 doesn't, it's a bit more, the wording of it's a bit more restrictive, and it says sort of limited in filling if it's identified in a neighbourhood plan. So I suppose, there is there's that area which is perhaps a bit more of a factor, but then you've also, to balance against that, you've got policy GBR2, you've also got other policies about the rural economy and so on. So there's we do feel that it is an appropriate type of development, scale of development in this location. Also, you've got the existing planning permission, so that is a material planning consideration. We've already granted planning permission for. If we could go back to slide 17, please. We've already granted planning permission for this. Oh, sorry, 18. Yeah, so 8. Yeah, that. Oh, sorry, go back one. We've already granted planning permission for that. So what we're talking about is, if we go to the next one, we're talking about 3 more houses. That's the difference between what we've already granted for planning permission for and what we are currently considering. In terms of our assessment of how is it infill development? Perhaps if we go to slide 1, please. Sort of view of the wider area. You can see how the sort of site fits in with the rest of the village. You've got to the south an earlier development, a sort of crescent shape housing of groups of semi-detached terraced housing, other groups of housing down School Lane of various different sort of typologies, some detached, some semi-detached. So when you look at the site, within that context and where the houses are going to go, we felt that it did, it could meet the terms of infilling within that sort of wider context. Also, it occupies a relatively small section of the whole site. In terms of design, take your points about the sort of the kind of appearance, but again, we do have to be mindful of the existing consent. If we go to slide 31, please. So. So this is the sort of elevations of the dwellings as previously approved. And then if we go to the next slide, please. And then the current proposals, there's a difference in terms of the appearance, in terms of more brick. The houses are sort of, they're detached houses, but they're a bit closer together on smaller plots, as we've heard. But on the whole, given what we've already approved, we don't really feel that there are grounds to refuse the application in terms of design quality for the housing. In terms of the rural economy, we do have an economic development officer, but they're generally sort of involved more on kind of employment space and provision of it in the district. They haven't been consulted on this application, but I think it's evident that there is a significant improvement in the quality of employment floor space that's provided on site. We saw currently the existing buildings are quite poor quality. Lots of them were built as temporary buildings, or designed as temporary buildings, and they've been there a long time, and they're really not fit for purpose for modern office or business use anymore. So the quality of the buildings is definitely going to be an improvement. And we've heard of the range of activities that happens on church farms. A wide range of existing businesses in the farmyard, and also the activities of rural care and church farm itself. So, which we see as positive for the rural economy. So, in order to provide new accommodation, which would hopefully better meet the needs of those businesses, we feel is a benefit of to the rural economy.
Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I have visited this site on a number of occasions, and it clearly makes a really positive, it's positive benefit to the wider community of Hertfordshire, North Herts, East Herts. And I definitely support that point that the buildings at the moment are at the end of their useful life. So, and I think that what's proposed is a big improvement. I think it's also very positive that the number of rural housing is a problem. It's a problem for younger people to find appropriate housing in the rural area, and so it's I'm pleased that that these extra houses have been offered on a smaller scale. I suppose it's probably outside this meeting as to what sort of terms they might be offered on, whether they would be offered in some kind of social housing or just commercially or on a lease basis. I don't know if that's something that could be answered. I have another point which is just about the Swift bricks, but so on condition 19, on the details of biodiversity enhancements, which will include a minimum of 16 Swift bricks. I think the request was for them to be integrated and to be and so that they are installed at an earlier stage before, not just before occupation, but I think perhaps what we've said before is before above ground development. So I mean, I can propose that amendment if that seems possible, but I'd also like a response on the other question of whether we can ask about the the status of the houses.
In terms of the housing, that's the sort of the high value use as part of the development. So that sort of adds to the viability of the development for the applicant. They're proposed to be private sort of market, general for sale housing. So I think we need to assume that they will be sold on the open market at this higher prices. The applicants are able to do that. There's nothing to stop them doing that. I mean, they may want to try to sort of prioritize sale to local people or something, but I don't think we can add any sort of weight to that necessarily, because we have not got any sort of means to control it. In terms of the Swift bricks, yeah, I think that was sort of recommended by the Swift group. I mean, I think we would be looking to sort of secure that as part of integrated bricks as part of the details that are submitted. But if members would like to sort of propose a more specific wording on that, then I don't think that would go against what we were thinking we were looking to achieve.
Councillor Carter.
In that case, I'd like to propose that amendment to just make sure that the Swift bricks are integrated and included before above ground development.
Councillor Buckmaster.
And I'll second that, please.
Okay, well, shall we? Oh, Councillor.
If we're going to have,
but just 1 second.
Sorry, I was just
Councillor
going to
Stowe.
ask planning officers if that was a condition that could actually work.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the trigger point. So instead of, the trigger point is prior to occupation. And I think the suggestion is to change the trigger point to prior to commencement of above ground works. Which I think, in our view, it wouldn't be reasonable to require the details to be submitted prior to commencement, but prior to above ground works is a sort of a bit of a compromise situation, which would allow developer to sort of get on with construction whilst and then sort of submit the details. And I think that would be wouldn't be unreasonable.
Councillor Stowe.
yeah, I was going to say, are you saying you want them installed before the ground work starts, because they'll be built into the houses at a high level, won't they?
I think the trigger point is for when the details are submitted for approval. So if they're submitted too late in the process, then it's harder to get them integrated into the building.
Okay, I think we've had Councillor Dunlop.
My turn now. I would just like to commend this. I think it's a fantastic application and a fantastic enterprise. Somewhere that's looking at making its own food production, using animals and plants, looking after the local community with special needs and all those things. I think it's an absolutely fantastic enterprise, and I'll be very strongly supporting this.
Okay, so I'm going to Councillor Estop.
Can I ask about barn 1?
Councillor Estop, is this a question for the officers?
Yes.
Can we have this vote first? For this? How do you feel about this amendment?
I'm sorry.
Shall we just vote for this amendment? It's been seconded by Councillor Buckmaster, so we're going to vote to approve that, including that amendment. Right. This is the amendment, the Swift bricks amendment.
Just the condition.
The condition only, not the application.
That's everyone. That's fine.
That's everyone. Right. Sorry, Councillor Estop.
Apologies, Chair. Just a question about barn 1, and this is where there's students and staff accommodation. Is there a link up between rural care and well, the farm activity actually, and a college? Is there an established link with the college or something? And the second question is the toilet block. It just seems to be for camping. I've read the report, and I just can't see that being useful if it's not for camping.
In terms of rural care, from what I mean, I'm probably not the best person to answer the question, but the applicant would, I'm sure, be able to sort of know all the details. But from what I've looked at on their website, they seem, and also there's a document they submitted as part of the application about rural care. Is they have a number of link ups with different. I'm not sure necessarily about colleges, but certainly corporate partners. They have a number of link ups with, and they arrange things like the sort of corporate responsibility away days, or they might be, if a company is looking to arrange an away day or something, they may do it at the site, and then they would also coincide that with doing, sort of conservation or agricultural work and things. So there are a number of partners, I understand, probably, commercial partners probably, but I'm not sure about colleges as such.
And could you answer the point about the outside toilet shower block?
In terms of the shower block, as we've sort of noted in the report, and I'm sure some of the members of the public have highlighted that as well in comments, there has been sort of previous camping taking place on outside of the red line area in the wider farm area. So the toilet blocks would be useful for that. The camping that has taken place doesn't have planning permission. Some camping is sometimes possible without needing planning permission, but that issue is subject to enforcement application or enforcement investigation. It may be required, maybe the applicants need to regularise the situation with regard to camping and submit a planning application or something at some point. But in terms of the toilet block, it would be beneficial for camping, but we're not granting camping as part of this application. But I think that it is. We also do feel that the toilet shower block is beneficial for the wider functioning of the farm, not including the camping as well. So, for instance, the farm has visitors, members of the public. They might go to the farm shop, then they might go down to the southern end of the farm, beyond the south end of the site, where there's a number of the sort of fields, enclosures with different animals in it, and so children and things would go and look. And so the toilet blocks would also be useful for visitors to the farm, day visitors, which is totally within the kind of within the lawful use of the site currently. So, and also it does support other activities that are part of the development. So, for instance, I think it has a linen store. So, the linen store is relevant to the holiday lets. The showers would be of use to anyone cycling to the farm or working on the farm on a placement or something like that. So I think they do have a value for the application proposals as well, not just for camping. So we do take the concern, and I think the camping issue is something that the enforcement team will be sort of looking at quite closely in the future, particularly if we resolve the current application. Once it's determined, then that gives a clear basis for moving on with any sort of enforcement investigations.
Okay, members, I think, Councillor Buckmaster.
Sorry, I was actually just going to say I was on the committee that approved the previous application, and I was very impressed with the design and the ethos behind the whole site. And I'm actually very much in favour of this again, and I like the fact that they actually have put in an extra 3 houses in a rural area that does need more housing. And I would have proposed to accept this application.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dunlop, you were first in there. All right, so we're going to be voting to grant planning application for this item 5C. It's 323-2185 LB. No, it's not. Am I looking at the wrong one there?
323-16414.
323-16414. Okay, do you put hands? 11 and abstentions. Oh, sorry, against? And no abstentions. Okay, that's granted. Yes, item 6, items for reporting and noting.
Discussion, I just noted.
Yep. If there's no discussion, we'll just noted that. Oh, Councillor Stowe.
All I was going to say was the appeals. It was good to see that East Hart's got it right most of the time.
And I'm going to move on to item 7, urgent business. Is it no urgent business? Okay, members, that concludes the agenda. I declare the meeting closed at 9:45.